Namaskara and welcome to BIC Talks, a podcast by Bangalore International Centre, bringing you conversations that move, inform, and encourage discourse.
If you say, I know, when you have the experience, it is dissolved. If you say, I don't understand, that's also void. Aruhina kuruhina marainoragare guheshwaranemburu. But you can't do without a symbol to reach that unsymbolizable domain. Aruhina kuruhanu maragallade. Unless you forget the symbol through which you are trying to understand that, when you forget that, you attain Yogeshwara. And what is he? He is all emptiness.
This series of lectures attempts to critique the more popular and currently accepted accounts of Vachana expression. First of all, Shivaprakash's approach problematizes the relationship between Vachanas and Lingayatism. It also seeks to demonstrate that Bhakti traditions cannot be seen independently of Natha and Siddha traditions. Though Basavanna's role in the formation of Vachana focus cannot be denied, it is in fitness of things, in the light of the range and number of castes actively involved, to see the Vachana efflorescence as a collective expression of all the castes and communities of Karnataka. Whereas the available literature has emphasized the devotional and mystical elements, this approach will emphasize the contribution of Vachana poets from the artisan class, who evolved their own spiritual philosophy of Kayakayoga, the yoga of labor, which is unique in our spiritual traditions. The framework of pan-Indian Bhakti is also interrogated in these lectures. The argument is placed that Bhakti traditions cannot be seen independently of Natha-Siddha and Saman traditions, which have different spiritual orientations. Those among Vachana poets whose philosophy and poetry is coeval with Siddha and Nirguna poets from elsewhere in India will be discussed in this episode. This episode is the last of a series of 4 lectures that were originally part of a masterclass that took place in the BIC premises in late July and early August, titled The Paths of the Hand, Heart and Void by Professor H.S. Shivaprakash, poet, playwright and educator. And now, over to Professor Shivaprakash.
In the previous sessions, I talked about 2 important dimensions of Vachanas in the context of Indian Bhakti and Siddha traditions. The first, because my first lecture was in overall bird's eye view kind of thing. Second one focused on the path of the hand, the philosophy, practice of Kayaka, which is the most unique thing about Vachanas, which we don't find in any other Bhakti or Siddha traditions of India. The second was the path of the heart, Bhakti. And I have been repeatedly saying that the Bhakti, as it was understood and expressed by Bhakti traditions, is different from what Bhakti means in ordinary parlance. And to put it in a nutshell, it's a kind of non-utilitarian love for the divine. It has no exchange value, no give and take. Today I'm going to talk about another important dimension of Vachanas, equally important, the path of void, the path of nothing. This emphasis on the non-temporality, non-spatiality, non-causality of spiritual experience is not unique to Vachanas. We also find it in other Bhakti and Siddha schools, particularly in Nirguna Bhakti tradition of North India. And sometimes those who perceive the divine in this way express themselves in a language which undermines the ordinary language. In Kannada, in the Vachana context, this mode of expression is called bedagu. In North India, in the context of Nirguna Bhakti poetry, in Kabir's poetry is called ulti ambasa. For example, in one of his dohas, Kabir says, the earth rained and heavens became fertile. This is an example of ulti ambasa. It inverts the ordinary language. And in the Tantric tradition also, there was a mode of expression called sandhabhasa. Some people say this is the apabhramsha, corruption of the Sanskrit word sandhya bhasha. They say twilight language. In fact, A.K. Ramanujan in his introduction to speaking of Shiva, he talks about Vedas, he compares the twilight language. It's translucent language. But it's not quite right according to me. It's not sandhya, twilights, sandha bhasha, it has something to do with sandigdha. The language of complexity. So the counterpart of this mode of expression in Vachanas is called bedagu. And this is not found in all Vachana poets. In fact, scholars in Vachana divide the Vachanas into two categories, Sarada Vachana, direct Vachanas, which we have been reading and trying to talk about in the past lectures. And the other is Bedagina Vachana. Oblique Vachanas is not direct. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. So Bhakti in the Vachanas is something that Vachanas share in common with other Bhakti traditions, though it has some unique features. And this nothing, void, is something that Vachanas expression has in common with some other schools of spiritual traditions in India. And the poet who is a past master in this mode is Allama Prabhu. Though it is found in some other Vachana poets, Allama Prabhu is the past master in this mode. So today I'm going to focus mostly on his Vachanas because he is the best exponent of this mode of expression. In one of his Vachanas, one of the words that Vachana poets use for this area of experience is Anubhava. Perhaps only in Kannada, only in the context of Vachanas, do we have a word which could be a pre-modern equivalent of the English word mysticism. Of course, lots of writers in mysticism, when they use the word, there are lots of semantic indeterminacy about it. Some people call it religious experience. For example, William James' famous book, Varieties of Religious Experience, and Aldous Huxley wrote a very important book, which was almost a cult book in the 80s. It's called The Perennial Philosophy. He's also talking about it. And several people have written about mysticism. But this word was a later day, rough and ready invention to talk about this domain of experience. Even in European tradition, there's a word called Gnosticism in European tradition. In India, though, this element of what is covered by the word mysticism today is found in different traditions, Shaiva, Shakta, and Tantric and Yogic traditions. There does not seem to be an umbrella word to talk about this domain. It is not Bhakti. This is more alike to Nirguna Bhakti, because this is the stage when Bhakti has to be bypassed. And Aldous Huxley uses a very interesting word for this process of understanding. He calls it unitive knowledge. Knowledge is normally analytical. I and you, this and that are present in ordinary perception of things. But in the spiritual perception, the binaries of ordinary perception break down. Last time I quoted a line from Kabir, जल में कुंभ कुंभ में जल बाहर भीतर पानी टूटे कुंभ जल जल ही समाना हि तत कथ्य ज्ञानी. There's water inside the pot, water outside the pot. When the pot breaks, water is still the water. So the existence and non-existence of the pot doesn't make any difference to water. So all your experiences are like a pot, it's a container. So what is experienced is beyond the container. Kabir also puts it in a very beautiful sentence. Pani ek, kuwa anek. The water is the same, but there are so many wells. So we have to keep these ideas in mind when we discuss the anubhava aspect of vachanas. Interestingly enough, this word anubhava is not used by any one of the Vachana poets from laboring castes. There are some, but those Vachanas seem to be interpolations. This is found mostly in the so-called major Vachanakaras. Dasimaya Deviva, who was a precursor of the Vachana movement, who belonged to the pre-Basava period, and sometimes in Basavanna, and sometimes in Allamaprabhu. Mostly in Allamaprabhu. The word Anubhava is a Sanskrit word. But in Sanskrit it doesn't have this meaning. The word Anubhava occurs in the 6th chapter of Bharata's Natya Shastra, where he's talking about the purpose of drama, which is Rasanishpatti. And when the disciples ask him, how is rasa produced? He says, Vibhava Anubhava Sanchari Samyogat Rasanishpattihi. Rasa is produced through the combination and permutations of vibhava, causal emotion, involuntary, and anubhava, involuntary emotions, sanchari bhava, voluntary emotions. This transforms the bhava in the poetry or in the play into the rasa experience for the audience. I'm not going to rasa theory because that was discussed for nearly 2000 years by the best minds in India. But this one shloka is a kind of foundational shloka, because that generated animated debates about the meaning of vibhava, anubhava, and so on. So anubhava means it is, for example, you listen to the song of a bird, cuckoo, coil bird singing, and suddenly your body, responds with some gestures, some motions, and so on. Something happens to the body. That is anubhava. And how somebody responds to it in his own particular ways, that is sanchari. So anubhava is something that is a stage when bhava, the archetypal emotion like Sringara Veera, is converted into rasa experience, because not all bhavas are delectable in actual life. For example, bibhatsa is one of the rasas, disgust is one of the rasas, And when we look at a mangled body lying on the street, nobody watches with his mouth watering unless one is Idi Amin or one of our TV channels. But in art, when the description of battle in Greek drama, for example, description of the utmost tragic events in Greek drama, it becomes delectable. People like it. Why? Because in the alchemy of theatre aesthetics converts this emotion, unpleasant emotion, into a distilled form of it is called rasa, which becomes is art emotion. Rasa is art emotion. So that meaning is not there in the Vachanas. And Bhakti is seen as rasa. I quoted quite elaborately from Acharya Utpala Deva from Kashmir, where he compares Bhakti as rasa. And later, aestheticians also tried to interpret, like Chaitanya Panthiya's, like Rup Goswami tried to explain Bhakti as the only kind of rasa, all other rasas derivative. Now, here, we're not talking about rasa at all. Because rasa is an experience that happens when your heart melts, when your body melts, when that feeling of ecstasy overtakes your body. And one of the Vachana poets, Gajesha Masanaya, puts it beautifully. He's a man, but he writes in the persona of a girl. He says, when my beloved held me, the pleats of my sari came loose, and when he embraced me, I could not see whether it was me or him or something else. So this is how one melts into the experience, an emotion that is bhakti. And for bhakti to express itself, you need something concrete, therefore some form, some name is needed. So this path of bhakti in the Vachana literature is defined as Bayala Alaya Gurisuvanu Bhakta. Bhakta is somebody who gives an airy nothing, to quote Shakespeare, a name and a form. Whereas the Jangama, who's more the knowledge type, wisdom type, he dissolves form into formlessness. So how do we deal with this formlessness? Of course, many methods of soteriology have been recommended. Ashtanga Yoga, this, that, and Vachanakara has also talked about the worship of Ishtalinga as a soteriological means of attaining spiritual elevation. Some people say Bhakti, and in Vamachar Tantra, Panchamakkara are used as a means and so on. But the highest means is no means. And when the experience, Ramanujan in fact translates Anubhava in the introduction as the experience. Anubhava is experience. Anubhava is the experience. When it happens, you can't say that your experience is the cumulative effect of all you have done. Because if the spiritual experience can be ascribed to a cause, it's the effect of some cause, then it falls into the domain of materiality. But this is a domain of complete freedom. In Kashmir Shaivism it is called Purnahanta, Swatantra Shakti. The highest power of Paramashiva is Swatantra Shakti, complete freedom. How can this cosmic being called Paramashiva, how can he respond to the seeker according to the laws of causality? Because the moment you accept the law of causality, your freedom is predetermined, curtailed. So let me directly quote a couple of vachanas and try to explain it. That this journey from nowhere to nowhere, we always think we have somewhere to go. But those who attained this stage of unity of experience, Anubhava, They say there is nowhere to come from, nowhere to go to. You're already there. Everything is here and now. So, Allama says, Aridinembudu tabayalu. If you say, I have known, I am aware, this is a word, very important word, bayalu, which is Vachanakaras use. Some people consider this to be an equivalent to the concept of shunya used in Nagarjuna's philosophy. But Allama Prabhu, in one of his vachanas, talks about nishunya. Emptiness, he said non-emptiness. Shunya is the negation of everything. There's a negation of this negation, nishunya. And the word bailu is the equivalent of it. It is a dimension of experience which encompasses everything. Another term which the German mystic Mr. Eckhart uses, he's trying to answer the question, it's an experience that happens in eternity. And what is that eternity? People build monuments, erect statues to immortalize themselves, to eternize themselves. But those people die. Even these monuments are subjected to corrosion of time, natural calamities. So they think that eternity is the projection of the present into future. But Mr. Eckhart said this is not eternity. He calls eternity pure duration. In pure duration, there is no past or future. It is not linear time. We're trying to use these terms just to make sense of what is very difficult to make sense of. It's vertical time. And all the time of a ritual, when we're going through, when we're experiencing a ritual, the time when we are absorbed in the rasanubhava, the experience, aesthetic experience of an object, of art, it is not linear time, it's vertical time. So, through art we reach it sometimes, but what artists are trying to reach unconsciously, the anubhavis are arriving there consciously. This is the difference. That's why Acharya Abhinavagupta, in his commentary on Abhinav Bharati, commentary on Natya Shastra, he called art experience Rasanubhava, Brahmananda Sahodara. It's the younger brother of Brahmanubhava. Because in Brahmanubhava there is no language, there is no communication. And it's not mundane experience. Today, a lot of theories in the West are talking about the materiality of art. If that was true, one could eat a loaf of bread painted by some French expressionist painter and didn't have to eat bread at all. You could smell the flowers in a painting and you don't need real flowers at all. So he says, Brahmananda, spiritual experience, the domain of this unity of knowledge that mystics are talking about, he says that it is neither worldly experience, art experience, is neither worldly experience nor spiritual experience. It's in between. But the domain of complete freedom, total freedom, a great Oriya poet, Bhima Boy, who lived in the 19th century, puts it very beautifully, Sunno mandire vihara. You dance in the hall of emptiness. There is no above, there is no below. There is no behind, no after, before, no after. So it's that kind of experience which by nature is ineffable, very difficult to talk about. It had best be experienced. Even Lao Tse said, whereof a man cannot speak, thereof he must be silent. But why do you still talk about it? There is some kind of answer to this question in the Shunya Sampadane, in the second chapter of Shunya Sampadane, where there's a debate between Allama Prabhu and another contemporary woman saint, Muktayaka. She tells Allama, ಅರಿವನರಿತರೆ ಎನ್ನನ್ನ ಅಜಗಣ್ಣನಂತೆ ಶಬುದ ಮುಗದನಾಗಿರಬೇಕು. If you have attained the highest wisdom, like my brother Ajaganna, who had just passed away, he should be Shabda Mugda, he should be ashamed of language. ನೀನೇಕೆ ಅಣ್ಣ? Why you are making all these noises? Allama replies, ತನ್ನ ತಾನರಿತರೆ ನುಡಿಯೆಲ್ಲವೂ ತತ್ವ ನೋಡ. If you have this knowledge of the self in the sense of that domain of all, whatever you speak becomes wisdom. ತನ್ನ ತಾಮರೆತರೆ ನುಡಿಯೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಮಾಯೆ ನೋಡ. And if you forget your own self of selves, then all your words, however beautiful they are a delusion. Gogeshwana Sharanam Nudidare Nirvachani. A Sharana of Gogeshwara, when he speaks, he is silent. Nadedare Nirgamani. When he walks, he is still. So that still point in movement. Shabdadora, Allama Prabhu himself says, Shabdadora Nishabda. The silence within the word. That core of silence within the word, which can be compared to the eye of the storm. When there is a storm in the ocean, there is turbulence everywhere. There is a certain point there where there is complete stillness. That point of stillness. The still center of the turning world, as T.S. Eliot puts it in Four Quarters. So that is the domain that these Vachanas, American Vachanas are talking about. He says, if you say, I know, when you have the experience, it is dissolved. If you say, I don't understand, that's also void. Aruhina kuruhina marainoragare guheshwaranenbudu tabayalu. But you can't do without a symbol to reach that unsymbolizable domain. Aruhina kuruhanu maradallade. Unless you forget the symbol through which you are trying to understand that, when you forget that, you attain Yogeshwara. And what is he? He is all emptiness. So it's a domain which is beyond yes or no, is and is not. In Jaina philosophy, they talk about Syadvada, 6 modes of knowing. Binary is one of the yes or no, which is the foundation of Western logic, is only one of them. There are 5 more. Seems to be is, but is not. Seems to be is not, but is. Neither is, nor is not. Both is and is not. So, and the ultimate knowledge of a jina, Tirthankara, they call it Kevala Gnana. They don't need to reason. They don't need to use some symbol, a concept. It's pure knowledge happening in pure duration. So Allama Prabhu is trying to suggest the same thing. And he illustrates this in some of the Vachanas by using paradoxical imagery characteristic of ಬೆರಗು ಮೋಡ್. ಬಯಲು ಬಯಲನೆ ಬಿತ್ತಿ, ಬಯಲು ಬಯಲನೆ ಬೆಳೆದು, ಬಯಲು ಬಯಲಾಗಿ ಬಯಲಾಯಿತಲ್ಲ. ಬಯಲು ಜೀವನ ಬಯಲು ಭಾವನೆ, ಬಯಲು ಬಯಲಾಗಿ ಬಯಲಾಯಿತಲ್ಲ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಪೂಜಿಸಿದವರು ಮುನ್ನವೇ ಬಯಲಾದರು, ನಿಮ್ಮ ನಂಬಿ ಬಯಲಾದ ಯೋಗೇಶ್ವರ. Ultimately, everything comes from that nothing, becomes nothing. Nothing, not in the negative sense, in the inclusive sense, with capital N, sometimes they use it. These are tricks of language we play to talk about something not easy to talk about. So, he says, this emptiness, void is sown, and it yields void. And what has happened? Void, through void, has become void. Bayalu jivana bayalu bhavane. All your life is emptiness, ultimately. The essence is nothing. Bayalu bhavane. All your inner experiences, they're also nothing. And all these modes of worship, these bhaktas, even that is void. Allah time again talks about the need to transcend bhakti. He says, ಬದುಕುವನ್ನಕ್ಕ ಭಜಿಸುತ್ತಿದ್ದರೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ತಾನಹದಿನಾವದು. How long will you go on worshipping and praying? When will you become that you are worshipping? He says, I can't worship, I can't pray. Nene endare yena nenevenayya. So bhaktas ask you to remember the Ishtadevata, the deity. From whom should I remember? Yana kayave kailasavagittu. My body itself has become kailasa. So why should I think of Shiva? Nana bhavavu bayalayittu. My feelings have become empty. So it's like you want to go to New York. You're thinking of New York, Statue of Liberty. But once you reach New York, you're standing right in front of Statue of Liberty. You don't need to remember New York and Statue of Liberty. So this is one way of explaining this domain. And even bhakti, these poets say, can exist, come into being because of anubhava. This domain, I don't know how to translate, the domain of non-linearity, non-temporality, non-spatiality, non-causality. That is Bayalu. Without that, even bhakti happens in that space. So Dasimaya the weaver, he says, Anubhavavillada bhakti tale kedagadu. Without anubhava, without this domain of all, bhakti it turns upside down. Anubhava bhakti gadhara. So anubhava is the foundation of bhakti. Anubhava bhakti ge nelavane. Anubhava is the basis of bhakti. Anubhava ullavara kandu turya sambhashne besagulidare narakadalikkaya Ramanatha. He says, whenever I see such a person who is steeped in anubhava, is absorbed in anubhava, if I don't engage in a conversation with him, send me to hell, O Ramanatha. So Even to talk to such people who attain this state of being, that itself opens the door for that unity experience. Basavanna also says, Anubhavillade bhakti anuvingebaradu. Without anubhava, anu also means the heart, but the bhakti will not enter our hearts. Anubhavillada linga samara sukakki nilukadu. Whether you worship a Shivalingam in the temple or in the Ishtalinga form as Sharanas recommended, unless there is this feeling of communion, then it's no use. Anubhavillada prasada parinama gondadu. So one of the Sharanas attach a lot of importance to eating prasada of a guru. Of course, in all spiritual traditions in India, in North India, they call it langar. So you go to a guru's place to eat langar because the food there is charged with the guru's spiritual vibration. That's how it brings about inner transformation, they say. So all systems of knowledge, if you look at from this point of view, are traps. Not only systems of material knowledge, also spiritual knowledge. In Kathopanishad, the distinction is made between prayas and shreyas. Prayas is happiness in this world. Shreyas is happiness hereafter. In some of the Vedic richas, they talk about Shanchami, Mayaschami. Shanchami means happiness in this world, Mayaschami, happiness in the other world. But for a Sharana who has attained the state of Anubhava, Anubhava Prabhu says, Gogeshwara Sharanange avalokavu illa. He has neither this world nor the other world. He has transcended all the world. Another Vachana, Kailasam Kaikuli. Why are you laboring like a coolie to attain Kailasa? Is it the wages that you get after your labor? So, Arideha Haridenemburu Deko Munde Mareve. People say, I know. There is Shat Darshana, each one of the Darshanas, we know best. He says, then why do they forget? So long as you know, I know, there are certain things you don't know, you've forgotten. ನೀನರಿದೆನೆಂಬುದು ನಿನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಲೇಸಾಗಿ ಉಳ್ಳಡೆ ನಿನ್ನರಿವೆಲ್ಲವ ಹರಿಹಂಚ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೋದರಿವೆಂಬರಳೆ. If you know within yourself that you know, whatever you know has to be torn to bits. You madman. ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರಗಣದೊಳಗಿದ್ದು ನಿಜವನರಿದೆನೆಂದರೆ ಮೂರ್ತಿ ಕಿರಲ್ಲ ನಿಲ್ಲು ಮಾಡು. So you're already in that ocean. And that ocean is called some kind of mass of consciousness. In Kashmir Shaivism it's called Chidanandaika Rasagana. It's a solid mass of consciousness, undivided consciousness. That is the ocean of consciousness. So when you are there, that is yourself. Then you say, I know myself. What nonsense is this? Murti kiridalla. So that which you are reducing it to is an image, is a form. It's trivial. Stop it. Guheshwara ringada ganagattyanarivade ninnarivellava harihanchu madi. You want to understand that ultimate called Gogeshwara. Even that is a provisional name, but it has no name. Ninnarivellava harihanchu madi. You just tear all you know to bits. Kabir puts it very beautifully in one of his songs. Dulhan ka pat kholo de tujhe piya milega. So long as the bridegroom is wearing this veil, he can't see the beloved face to face. He said, tear up this pata, dulhan ka pata, this veil of the bride. Only then will you get the beloved. So all constructed, accumulated knowledge is an obstacle to the knowledge of this unitive domain. Elsewhere, Allama says, ಅನುಭವ ಬಣ್ಣಗಳಿರೋ ನೀವು ಕೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, you talk about experience, ಅನುಭವ, experience, the experience. He compares ಅನುಭವವೆಂಬೊಂದು ಎತ್ತು ಕೆಟ್ಟಿತ್ತು. It is a bull which has gone astray. ಎತ್ತು ಗೇಣುದ್ದ. The bull is this size. ಕೊಂಬು ಬಡದುಡ್ಡ. But his horn is this size. Kettentu dina. It went astray 8 days ago. Kandu 16 dina. And I had seen it 16 days ago. Nenne mettida natya monne mevuda kande. The sprout which was sown, the plant which was sown yesterday, I saw this bull eating the previous day. Goggeshwara namba yattu dimaraga idane. The bull called Goggeshwara is within you. Elsewhere he says, yatta neeri yatta narsuta hoda yatta hoda Goggeshwara. You are riding a bull, but you are going in search of the bull. You forget you are riding it. There's a famous, painting which is used by in Chinese Buddhism, in Chan Buddhism. There is somebody who is going in search of a bull, sitting on a bull. Ultimately, somebody points out to him, "You're already sitting on the bull," and then he realizes he is riding it. So ultimately, all your quest will go back to yourself. All meditation ultimately turns back to the meditator. And sometimes Alam expresses this in very intensely lyrical modes, which is unlike the other modes that employed by people who are predominantly belong to this devotion, bhakti kind of mind. He says, Mugila bannada pakshi magana kaiya aragidi. The cloud-colored bird perching on the child's palm. Gaganada kolambinalli swapnada vecchavanu yaro. With the arrow of space, Gagana, sky, who shot at this space of dreams. Upamisabaradu is beyond similes. Jagras Swapna Sushupti Anarive Trijagavayattu. Of course, in Vedanta and in the Tantras, they talk about 4 stages of being. Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, wakeful knowledge, ordinary consciousness. Swapna, dream consciousness. And when we are in deep sleep, are we experiencing things? Yes. Because if you There are some instruments to measure the kind of beta, theta in psychology. They say that there's eye movements are still happening. RE, rapid eye movement, RE, YAM, they say, still happening, which means you're still experiencing. You forget it, you're not aware of it. So the highest knowledge, it says, happens in Turiya, in the fourth state of consciousness, which is inclusive all this. This fourth state of consciousness, in Shivagamas this is called Parashiva Tattva or Parasambit. In Vedanta this is called Parabrahman. In Buddhism this is called Bodhicitta, in Mahayana Buddhism, Buddha mind. So, experience happens in all three stages, states of being, Jagra, Sapna, Sushupti, wakeful, dream and sleep, and in a space which is beyond them. In Shiva Sutra, the very important text of Kashmiri Shaivism, they say that Trayam Bhokta Vireshaha. Who is Shiva? Viresha. Trayam Bhokta, he establishes himself in the fourth dimension of consciousness, Turiya, and is able to experience all states of consciousness, Jagrata, Sapna, Sushupti, not one after the other, not sequentially, simultaneously. Because this is the state where all distinctions break down. So when you look at experience from this angle, everything looks paradoxical. Allama says in one of his Vachanas, it's a very famous Vachana, Yattana Mamara, Yattana Kogile. Where was the mango tree? And from where did the mango tree come? From where did the koil bird came? Yattanindatta sambandhavaya. What kind of kinship is this? Bettanalli kai, the mountain gooseberry, samudra dagana uppu, the salt of the seas. Yattanindatta sambandhavaya. What kind of kinship is this? Inago Gogeshwar Yattananda Samandhavaya. Then what is this kinship between me and Gogeshwar? This is a paradox. So, all paths lead to pathlessness. All knowledges, forms of knowledge, are dissolved in that state of unitive knowledge called Anubhava. And that is the basis of all experience. And after having entered that state, from that dimension of experience, from the heart of that space within, which is also without, Allama is talking to us. Of course, in another Vachana he says, Maya bennali banda marudayandu nananida pariyanoda. I realized that I am the crazy one who chased illusion Maya. And Maya in the context of Vachana has a different meaning than in Shankaradvaita, where Maya is considered illusion. In Shaivism, Kashmir Shaivism and this Sharana philosophy, Maya is not illusion. Maya is constricted, limited knowledge. So we begin with this limited knowledge. We think that I am so and so, Anu. In Tantra this is called Anava Mala. Ego, impurity of the ego being. Tani Guheshwaranam Dvarida Pariyangoda. And then I realized I am not a mad one chasing Yogeshwara, Maya. I am myself Yogeshwara. I thought the real I was somewhere else. So I wandered here and there, but ultimately everything was where I was. This experience between the realm of relativity and the realm of the absolute, Buddha in his Tipitikas talks about Laukiya Satcha and Paramatta Satcha. Of course, later it was smuggled into Advaita philosophy. The Buddha talked about the relative truth and the ultimate truth. For example, in Buddhist philosophy, I explain it this way: when I look at this object, any solid object like this, from the perspective of limited knowledge, Lokiya Satcha is holding together solid. But when you look at it with the Paramatta Satcha, the ultimate truth perspective of the Buddha, you see this is not stable, everything is changing. Your perception becomes so subtle that what you think solid is not solid. Everything is in a flux. Now, what Allama is talking about, is it possible for us to perceive both Lokiya Satcha and Paramatta Satcha simultaneously? Both within and without simultaneously. Perceive all polarities from a domain which is immanent in and transcendental to all these polarities. How do we get there? So they say, you are already there. So the pedagogical mode of understanding is very similar to, of expression is very similar to, there is a form of expression in Japanese Zen Buddhism is called cone. So the master gives a cone, something like a paradox, a riddle for a disciple to meditate on. The purpose is to break down, smash the rational structure of the mind which stems from temporality, spatiality, and causality. So it's like the disciple goes and asks his master, how can I attain Buddhahood? He says, go and listen to the clap of one hand. How can I find the Buddha? He says, when you see a Buddha on the street, kill him. That's how you find Buddha. So it's a not irrational, but non-rational way of explaining, because this domain is cannot accommodate rationality. So this is also an important aspect of Vachanas. It's not unique about Vachanas. I have said this is also find it in another tradition. There's another dimension of Vachanas which I didn't dwell on because I didn't think it is so essential. That is, I'll make a brief mention of it. It is the dimension of didacticism and satire in Vachanas. So when the saint poets criticize the followers of different schools because that this is done by all followers of all schools, The Paramata Khandana is part of it. And also they expose the vanity of the world. And after this serious lecture, I conclude with somewhat comical relief, Vachanas, Vachanas. This is a satirical Vachana. Here, a snake charmer and his wife are going to look for a bride for their son. On the way, and the snake charmer's wife is broken-nosed. The snake charmer is holding a snake in his hand. From the other direction, another snake charmer comes. He also has a snake in hand. His wife is also broken-nosed. But snake charmer 1, when he looks at snake charmer 2, he says, this is bad omen, let's go back home. Forgetting that he is himself a snake charmer, and his own wife is broken-nosed. And he also holding a snake. Says, people of the world are like this. So what shall I call such curs, C-U-R-S, curs, who give others names without looking at themselves? O Kudal Samadeva, says Basavanna. And Allama Prabhu a lot of times speaks about other systems. He says about temple worship, he says, Deva Vandare Degula Uritta Kandi. Dumbi Bandare Pushpa Uritta Kandi. When the bee came, I saw the flower flee. When the deity came, I saw the temple flee. And so on and so forth. There's another dimension of it, but the most important dimensions are the Kayaka, the spiritual philosophy and praxis of labor. Second is Bhakti, which is the path of the heart, that's the path of the hand, and then this is the path of emptiness. Then is it a path? Then yes, stop there.
Thank you for staying on for the full conversation. If you like what we do, please share it with your friends and family. You can also leave us a review or rating on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. The crew that makes these podcasts possible is Gaurav Krishna on sound supervision and production, with support from S. Sarvanaraj and Raghavendra Tenkaila. Artwork and design is by Chandni Venkataraman of Crisscross Design Studio. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast platform. It can also be accessed on our website, bangaloreinternationalcentre.org. Do follow us on Instagram for updates on all our programming. This is Lekha Naidu signing off on behalf of everyone at BIC.